All right, welcome everyone to our conference call or program and bedtime routines. It's straight up on the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm joined today, again, fortunately for me, by my colleague and friend Carla Cay Williams.
Hi.
And many of you have had the pleasure of hearing Carla Cay speak in person before. If you haven't, you're in for a treat along with me here today. She does a lot of our one-day and international courses and is an expert international speaker on sensory issues and was kind enough to come back even though I was twisting her arm. And we're going to do a couple in a row together here, which is really fun for both of us anyway. So, Carla Cay, I'm happy that you're on the call, and our next conference call in July is going to be on transitions. I'll mention that at the end, but we appreciate that Carla would humor me to go ahead and attend here again today. So thanks a lot, Carla. Our goal when we look at this, and Carla and I have talked a lot about it, is because it's a 30-minute call and it's pretty short, we're going to kind of rip through a lot of things. Our goal being emphasizing two general themes. The first one being keeping it really simple. And we're assuming we have a lot of different levels of expertise of folks on the call. So what I like to say is when we try to do too many things at once, we get ourselves in trouble and get overwhelmed, and that's not going to help anybody. So hopefully that's a big part of our time today here. And those of you that are already doing a lot of the things or considering a lot of the things in your homes or in your work with your clients, hopefully you'll get to feel validated for what you're up. And then the next one, of course, that's a huge one for us, is we really try to look at how do we set clients and family members up to be successful. It's been a huge emphasis for Mary Sue, Carla Cay, and me in our work with the ALERT program over the decades. So assuming that you're on this call because things are not maybe going so great in terms of how your bedtime routines are, or you have people in your caseload that don't, let's see, if your bedtime routine sounds a little like this, oh my, and you wish that it didn't, perhaps you were wishing for more of a waltz or something that way, then that's what we're here to talk about. So we touched on a couple of things when we recorded the morning routines conference called Carla Cay, and the biggest thing that when you and I were talking about this, that we talked about thinking about bedtime routines is how tricky they are, first of all, and we think that a lot of that's due to the complexity of the subject. So we had a quote from a journal here. I'll read. It says, sleep and behavioral problems, or sleep behavioral problems really, are among the most frequent parental concerns in pediatric practice and counseling services. And so this is true for all of us in our different practices. That's a quote from a journal article that we'll send along to you in the resource document, and we'll be referencing that a number of times during the call. But after the call, you'll receive an email with some of the resources that we mentioned. So that's true, and it was in the journal for 0 to 3, but it's certainly true with our kids with sensory challenges. If you're experiencing those kinds of challenges, just really know you're not alone. For that to be kind of one of the most frequent concerns for families really speaks to, again, what we talked about in terms of the complexity. So there's a number of other factors, not just the sensory part of it, not just the routine, that we want to kind of just address. Of course, sensory pieces are going to loom large, but there's a lot of things we might want to also consider.
And some of you are dealing with a lot of those things, like there might already be underlying medical problems that some of your kiddos have. And another thing that's becoming really common is food and environmental allergies or intolerances that you might not even be aware of that your kid is struggling with and that may have to be addressed before they can sleep. Those food intolerances especially can often also lead to gastrointestinal disturbances where their tummies aren't feeling good, and that makes it hard to go to sleep too. And then, just sleep apnea and seizures and all of those other things that we need to consider. And, for many of our kids, these are more common with children on the spectrum, but especially the food intolerances are becoming more and more common with just lots and lots of kids.
And it's not really, I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. When we have kiddos who are experiencing some extra sensitivities in multiple areas, but we definitely want to not be misleading or remiss in mentioning those medical pieces. They're huge, they're important, they're real. We need to make sure that those are being considered when we're looking at the whole picture of the child and the family, obviously. And then again, of course, medications. Lots of our kiddos are on different medications for many different factors, and those all can have, and we want to look at possible side effects in terms of that. Now, when we were talking about what we wanted to cover, because this is such a big issue, Carla and I were kind of decided that we would tease it out, and in the call today, really try to stay focused on the idea of getting to sleep and supporting children and families in how to get to sleep. There are plenty of our kiddos who are having sleep disturbances and sleep interruptions. That feels like almost a whole nother ball game when Carla and I were talking about it, and to try to address both in this call would probably leave us not having covered very much at all well. So certainly we'll look to get some more information on that sometime in the future, but this probably isn't it. This is really more, we're going to start to talk about a lot of how we get to sleep. And one of the things we mentioned in the morning routine call that I feel like is still worth revisiting here is talking about hours of sleep, Carla.
Yeah, and what we talked about is that the hours of sleep kids need is way more than I think any of us really realize. And this goes all the way from our babies up to teenagers.
Absolutely.
That you'll receive a link about the book that has this information in it called Healthy Sleep Habits, Happy Child. But average hours of total sleep for a 1-year-old can be, this is total sleep, nighttime and daytime. So kids up to 4 years old are still taking naps. Most kids by age 5 are not taking naps anymore. So we're combining the naps in with the total hours of sleep. But at a year, it's 12 to 15 and a half hours. By 2 years, it's 11 to 14 hours. Up to 4-year-olds, it's still 10 and a half hours of sleep they need in a total day. By the time they're 5 years old, their night sleep needs to be 9 3/4 hours to 12 and a half hours. And that goes for 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds as well. 8-year-olds now are about 9 1/4 to 12 hours, and even up to 10 years old goes 9 to 11 hours. And Sherry actually has an article where teenagers are even showing that they need 9 to 11 hours of sleep.
Absolutely. That's from the National Sleep Foundation. We'll put that in your resource list that we send out email-wise. And one of the things that I thought, especially because our teens are often our ones that I think families can get really frustrated with. It's so hard to get teenagers to bed before 11 o'clock, and they talk a little bit about that, 11 o'clock at night in the article. And then, of course, with school schedules, a lot of the teenagers are on our earliest school schedules. And despite lots of information that's been out there for a very long time about how important it is and how hard it is for kids, especially in teenage periods, to get to sleep, we see lots of biological shifts, changes in hormones, all those things. It's huge. And one of the things I thought was especially interesting in that article is that they talked about talking to your teens that driving without enough sleep is equivalent to having had drinks. And one of the things that they talk about there is that it's like starting out with a blood alcohol content level of 0.08 before you even get behind the wheel. So it's really huge. It's a health issue. It's on so many levels. We know that good health is supported by having good sleep and enough good sleep, a good quality sleep. So bedtime obviously isn't only about the hours before bed. And this was a point you made, Carla, that I thought was really huge.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're going to spend time when we're talking about strategies talking about is that bedtime isn't just the routine and the hours before bed. It's everything you have to control during the day to make sure that sleep just comes naturally. And we've talked a little bit about that, about making sure they're having good food, making sure they're drinking plenty of water, whether they have naps or no naps, and then also exercise and movement and getting big activity through the day helps all of us sleep better through the night.
You don't say, us as OTs. We would want to emphasize that part and how important it is. So in terms of that, I was thinking back to how we work for, and we had the opportunity to both of us to work in a camp setting where lots of kids kind of following up on the movement and the routines and everything, where we have a lot of kids who's sleeping over, who have sleep struggles or have anxiety or have concerns about sleep, and they're in a new environment, things are going, And having big movement and lots of routines is a huge part of that, and that very often a couple of nights into it, by just establishing that different routine, we see a huge difference in how well our kiddos sleep. And one of the things I love about camp is that whole the campfire thing, where we're looking at that winding down period, creating those things, just kind of that deal. And the other thing I notice in our camp schedule, going back to that it's what we do during the day that supports us for a good bedtime routine, is that we used to have kind of quiet time every day at camp after the meal. You would have about a half hour where everybody went back to the cabin. You got in your bunk. You could read. You could sleep. You could whatever. Here in the Southwest, because our things are so hot, during the day, the siesta thing seems to make a whole lot of sense to me in terms of temperatures and things. So just kind of looking at those factors and following up in that way in terms of how much it can take and making those routines nice. The other thing that we think about is calming, and calming isn't the be-all, end-all. As we all know, there are plenty of our kids who have nervous systems that need a little help to get in a better place to be able to go to sleep. So even though we talk a lot about calming, everybody thinks a lot about calming, we want to acknowledge on this call for sure that calming isn't the only thing. We may need a lot of heavy work, and having had that heavy work spaced out during the day and possibly even right before bedtime is going to be a big help. Kind of those wind down periods are going to be different for different people. I joke that I kind of come from the slug family. I can fall asleep. Reading is important to me before I fall asleep. I like to have just kind of a book on my bedside and stuff, but it could be a murder mystery. I mean, the content, I'm not recommending this for children. I'm saying that's how dramatic my slugness is in terms of that. But just looking at what those wind down periods are, and we have lots of good suggestions for that in terms of some things on, there's an autism fact sheet that we'll go ahead and send a link to that talks about just how huge it is to establish some of those positive sleep and bedtime patterns, that when we establish those patterns, it just makes it easier for us on a brain chemistry level and on a behavioral level to keep that up, that we have good positive things that way. There's also, we'll include in your resource list a link to an Australian Occupational Therapy Journal article where they basically looked at how much families needed support to establish those good routines about dinner time and bedtime. Both of them can feel a little hairy and a little harried for lots of us. So it was nice to see that, again, that what we kind of know to be true being reinforced a little bit. Carla's going to take us into some room setup ideas here when we look at that.
We're going to send you a link also about a great checklist from the Mercola website, and it has really all of the things in there that we would ever want to address about room setup. But the biggest things I think it talks about in there are making sure, again, that there's lots of movement in the day that can help sleep, not having a loud alarm clock. For the kids, maybe doing letting the natural light be the wake-up thing, looking at removing all the things like light from the television, light from the alarm clock, anything like a phone nearby, making sure that you're not watching TV and limiting screen time before bed. This is a huge one that there's lots and lots of research about now, that screen time is computer time, TV time, anything like that, and making sure that happens at least an hour or two before bedtime, not right before bedtime. Any electrical devices in your room, anything like that. But you'll have a whole list of that to look at when we send you the links. But just getting the room set up so that it's at the best darkness and quietness and all of that. And temperature is another thing they talk about, making sure the room is cool. So some other things for you to look through and consider when you're just thinking about how the room should be.
Absolutely, and I think they talk about that. Mercola's website is set up obviously for a typical population. So these are all good things that all of us can consider, but especially our kiddos that are sensitive. Remember that those sensitivities may have effects of things last a lot longer, so we want to allow those times in our routines. He also addresses some of the nice science about melatonin and serotonin production, which we know to be really important in brain chemistry and helping us in terms of nervous system and general health So that's a nice link that we'll send to you. But and when again, I'll come back to kind of our theme there. Carla said, this is that moment because of the complexity of bedtime routines and the challenges that we face for some of our family members, that controlling what we can, and this is a piece you can control. You're the big people. You can control whether there are electronics in the room, when screen time ends, how dark the environment is, how they wake up, all that kind of thing. If you're a slug like me, you may need significantly loud wake up. It's not good for my health, though. My heart starts racing. I really try to stay as much as I can on a natural sleep schedule, and it's huge when I can do that. It's interesting because even though I'm a slug, I will wake up naturally at times. It's just when we have our forced schedules and have to wake up outside of those natural times that I really need a ton of help. Let's see. We'll go to that very famous Shakespearean quote, "To bathe or not to bathe," Carla. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, families too. I think this is one of the hardest things. I think where it's kind of put into us when we're kids that you take a bath before you go to bed. And
right.
I think that we have to just ask ourselves if that's really the best thing for a kiddo. And it was actually a kiddo who taught me this, and he was doing a summer program with us and was talking about, for him, how the bath was the thing that made him feel the best all day. He actually turned it into a sensory diet, and he ended up taking baths several times through the day in the summertime because it just helped him calm down all through the day. And so they didn't need to take a bath at night. And some kids also, it's not just the whole routine of taking a bath. It's taking a bath and being able to be in there for a long time.
Right.
Maybe they need a 45-minute bath with just the right bath temperature and a long time to sit in there and blow bubbles and talk and play and just be in that water. And that may be the only bedtime routine thing they need, because then you can get them in their jammies right there, walk them right to bed, and they'll be ready because they've already put themselves in a just right place. So those are some things you can look at.
And that's so nice, because that leads us into the thinking of, well, when I think of that, I think, as parents, we're going, oh my gosh, I can't allow that much time in the schedule for the bath. But the truth is, let's look at it, because for that family and for that kiddo, it was so valuable. It was absolutely worth carving out that time for the bath. And it may not, as you said, have to be right before bed. We may be able to do some other times and create some fun pieces of the routine, because there is just the pleasure of it, not only just the sensory setup that way. All right, we're going to start. Many of you are familiar with it. In the Alert program, we talk about kind of 5 ways we took the complicated concept of from the Wilbargers of sensory diet, and kind of put our own touch on it in terms of looking at 5 ways of looking at strategies. So we'll kind of go through and pick and choose and list a few strategies. Again, many of these will be familiar to some of you. That's fine. But we'll want to try to kind of just give you a few stories and name a few that you can take a look into here. So in the mouth, and the mouth categories first, because it is definitely a very powerful category. Looking at the timing and the kinds of snacks that kids eat who do need snacks. A lot of our kids need multiple meals throughout the day. That's not a bad thing. But looking at the kind of snacks, proteins maybe a little bit earlier in the evening, not especially for our kids who have some digestion problems. And looking at some of the lighter foods a little bit later. Breath work, you said, Carla, about bath time, just blowing bubbles in the bath. For me, I notice how much, for my nieces and nephews, just singing songs and doing that wonderful, fun stuff with our breath, and getting into those songs that we know and that help us to kind of get organized again. Having drinks or using suck in some kind of a way, so our kids who do smoothies or even just water bottles, but sucking through a straw, the things that we know. I know that can have toileting issues, so I get it there, but we can take a look at that. My brother likes to play the recorder. That's kind of a real calming thing for him a little bit, and I noticed that when he'll pick it, it's very interesting that way. We have a couple of blowing games in the Take 5 book that you could look up. Some just blowing cotton balls with straws, really simple things. Making art with little pieces of paper and straws and moving them that way. And then, of course, the mouth experts. I'm not saying they're mouthing off. I'm just saying they're mouth experts with Patty Otter, who we've gotten to learn so much from, and of course Eileen Richter and Sheila Frick. Their books, The More Book, and then their booklet, Out of the Mouths of Babes, I think is a nice resource. It kind of talks a lot about mouth and breath and how that has whole body effects, not just that we're looking at a mouth strategy that way. Then in the move category, you talked a little bit about some of this, Carla, but go ahead and give us a few.
So, again, lots of people think we have to avoid exercise before sleep, but some of our kids with their nervous systems, they need that heavy work before they go to sleep. Not necessarily cardio, getting all revved up, but that really intense heavy work that's not tickling, that can really get them ready. And there's lots of those activities in the Take 5 book. There's chores, there's things they can do, and again, you'll have to find out if this is right for your kiddo or not. Arm pushes and pulls. Some kids like the movement of being rocked or in a glider, and it may not even be just your little kids. They like to move too.
I know. I love rocking chairs and gliders still to this day. I think it's so not a coincidence that they're in our nurseries, huh?
And then, that rough and tumble play, we kind of laughed at a lot of the studies about sleep and how we can do that are actually studied on animals. And when I think about animals, I think about my dogs. So any of you who have had pets, you know that when you have dogs, the first 2 years of their life, they have what I call the crazies. One time is right about an hour after they wake up, where they've kind of eaten and gone to the bathroom, and now they're ready to play, and they can just tear in the backyard for no apparent reason, just crazy running all over. But when the other time that happens is in the evening. They'll just take off and run for a good amount of time in the evening as they're actually winding down to get ready to go to sleep. So you just might notice that some of your kiddos might be with the lions and tigers and bears. Just surprising.
That's right,
for
our
you.
rough and tumble play research. And I did look a little bit. It inspired me when I was looking at some of the more recent articles on this that we'll probably do another conference called just on rough and tumble play, because it's so much of what we know and do in terms of our work in OT. But in the article, they talked about rough and tumble play in us as humans, not only for our big mammal literature. And they said that really it's huge in helping with that frontal lobe maturity, which gives us better executive function skills, which we know is a struggle for a lot of our kids. Better behavioral flexibility, better foresight. These are some things that were mentioned in a really nice article called Spontaneous Play in the 21st Century. And the author goes through and talks about how he sees play being different than it has been in past years, and what some of the things that we might want to look at to be including more for some of our kids. Then in the touch category, again, we're back to the bathing thing, but shower, bath, those preferences, temperatures. We also have a little article that I'll send to you, or the link to you, about a family that talked about a hug, an extra big hug, kiss, and a squish. So really that deep pressure work that we know to be true. So that pushing, the compression, the lying with kids, lying on top of kids. I'm not talking about it in a weird way here, obviously, in terms of we don't want to scare kids. We don't, but what's right for your children. But that extra big pressure seems to really be very helpful. And so we want to take a look at if it's helpful, then how do we help that to happen for that child in their bedtime. I know in the camp setting I had a little guy who was 10 years old, and he each night, it turned out, would ask me for a little massage. He'd have a shoulder pain or a neck pain or something that he wanted a little work on, and I think it was just a great way for us to have a quiet time. He connected. I just work a little bit, nice touch. Lots of our kids like even back scratches, which seems odd because the light touch can often be a little more stimulating, but in this case, some of our kids. So really looking at what are their preferences, what are the things that help and support them, because I often felt that it wasn't that he really had so many aches and pains. I felt like it became part of his routine, and I was built into it there, and I was happy to be built into it at the camp just so he could sleep well. We look at lots of stuffed animals, textures of covers, body pillows, because we like to pretend we're all big people here, but we'll spend a lot of money on the body pillow here when we need it to help with sleep.
So I had another kiddo who, when he went to sleep at night, the thing that works the best for him, and this is a little bit about temperature, a little bit about deep pressure touch, but he would wrap himself as tight as he could in a cocoon in his blanket. He looked like a cocoon that a caterpillar would be wrapped in. But in order to do that and stay with the covers like that all night, he needed his ceiling fan turned on full blast. And so here he was, a middle school age kid, able to manage his sleep by knowing exactly what pressure he needed and how to keep the temperature at the right place.
Exactly, because when you have that many covers on, it's going to get hot, isn't it? So good for him for figuring it all out and getting his formula, and good for that family for allowing him to figure it out and getting that formula. That's good for everybody, right? Those of you that have kiddos who still need you to sleep with them, there's a nice little link we'll send you to in the resource thing. Again, on the SPD Blogger, folks, they have a lot of good parent tips because a lot of parents who've been through lots of challenges with their little ones. But they talked about and Carla and I were thinking about it, just imitating what's good about having this parent sleep with you. So is it the neutral warmth and the pressure? Is there a way you could do a body pillow? And one of the great things that they had when their kiddo was able to tell them with words when they were saying it's time for you to sleep alone, is he wanted a shirt from one of them. So smell. And just that piece. And I thought, what an absolutely fantastic thing. They said, the shirt we can negotiate. You get a shirt. So they even just where we might put a T-shirt over a pillow and help with smell in terms of having that. Another link we'll send, which we won't go into a lot here, is from a great agency here locally called Parents Reaching Out. And they have some wonderful first step tips that you can get on and look at. One's called Bedtime Battles, and we'll send you the link for that, so that might have some other nice things. They talk a lot about that routine again, cuddle time, hug, kiss time. It's such a wonderful, rich part of our family time to be with our loved ones. We want to make sure we're not ignoring it.
And I think, too, the other great thing about that article, and we haven't really touched on it a lot, but that we have to take into account is, you've heard this from Mary Sue and Sherry if you've heard them lecture, but talking about co-regulation.
That's right. We do emphasize
that it is so important for the parents to be in a just right place, too,
Absolutely.
to sometimes manage the ups and downs of these bedtime routines. And for some of you, you'll be thinking about supporting people, or for yourself, changing routines in big ways or small ways, and you have to be ready for that too. And what we're also saying by this is that time that you get to spend with your kiddo during this bedtime routine is so good for them emotionally and behaviorally, and can really set down some good patterns that will last for them the rest of their lives. So just think about your own sensory diets in this time too.
And it's easy for us to say, right? Because we're not the ones stressed about, we got to get the kid down, we're working on the timeline. But how ridiculous is it for us to be going, go to sleep, relax, right? That's just a little crazy, and we can all see that and know that. So in the look category, I think things that people are already doing a lot's about managing the lights, having lights out kind of time. I know one of my nieces likes to have the door open so much, and so the hallway light comes in for a little bit, but then we want her to have deep sleep. We want her to have a dark room. So then, of course, as the parents are going to bed or after she's asleep, going ahead and closing the door the whole way. She knows that's going to happen. Lamps that go off slowly, and then lots of nice things that we can do, you can look at for resources in terms of the look category. They have some of those really cool nightlight things and stuff, but then again, you get the electromagnetic trade-off. So these are the decisions of parenting and the decisions that we want to make for the culture of our families. In the listen category, reading books and snuggling and remembering that we can use all of our good touch stuff in that. Classical music, sing-songy melodies, that kind of thing. Favorite bedtime music. We got to go to the aquarium here in Albuquerque for a sleepover recently, and my niece so needs things in the listen category to go to sleep. She brought her boombox to the aquarium. What are the odds we're going to be able to plug this puppy in when we get there, sleeping on the floor in front of the fish tank, But she was actually a little bit worried about it, and so I was like, oh, this really kind of brought it out to me. Of course, everyone worries a little bit about sleeping with the fishes. It has a bad connotation in terms of mob categories, but in this case, it was like, oh, I really get it. So luckily, we figured out a way for her to do some music and some things that could work in terms of headphones for her there, and it worked out fine. One of the other favorites that on our Alert Program CD that was a common favorite was a Hawk song that's on the Alert Program Songs for Self-Regulation. I kind of joke that's got a beautiful drum and beat. It'll put almost anybody out if that's what you're wanting. So just kind of looking, white noise machines, different things that way. So we are coming up against our time here. So I'm not going to go ahead and get to the questions, because when we looked at what questions are so common and the questions that folks had, it really was the complexity of the issue and coming back to keeping it simple in what we add and doing it systematically, not having to do all of the kinds of things we talked about at once, supporting families to set up the nervous system for as much success as possible, and remembering it's a really complex issue. Anybody tells you they have a magic bullet about bedtimes and sleep problems, I would be very hesitant to believe them. It is a complex thing. That's probably why you're experiencing the challenges that you are. So since we're coming up against it in terms of time here, I want to thank Carla Cay again for joining me. I want to make a common sense disclaimer that remembering that you're the big person, trust your judgment. If something was mentioned here, you have questions, or you just don't feel good about trying it, don't. And seek professional help. You deserve to have support. So when in doubt, check it out before you proceed with anything that we might have said or blathered about here that isn't feeling like it's a right match for you or your family. I think that's it. I hope you'll join us on our next conference call. It'll be about the Alert Program and transitions, and Carla Cay will be with me again. You probably feel that I'm holding her hostage here, which there is some element of truth to that. So we'll just play out a little song, and you can log off whenever you would like to here. Thanks a lot for listening. We sure enjoyed the time here, and I hope that it was valuable for you.
5 ways, you got 5 ways to maximize your day. Now, move, touch, look, listen, and find your way. In your mouth there's much to do. Bite, crunch, lick, blow, chew. Engine changes can be dicey if you like it sweet or sour or spicy. 5 ways.